Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Exploring Market Opportunities Part 2. How many of you guys were in Part 1 this morning? All right, so a few. So in this session, we'll be hearing from the South Carolina Department of Agriculture, Clemson University, and Carolina Farm Stewardship Association to get an overview of basic food safety and good food handling practices. So this session will be moderated by Dave Lemie. And Dave directs the South Carolina New and Beginning Farmer Program and has provided leadership for several food systems related efforts across the state and the region. He is deeply interested in helping emerging and existing food entrepreneurs and farmers to find successful pathways to help build the food economy of the future. So I'm going to turn it over to Dave and we'll get started.
Okay. Very well. I made the mistake in the first session, maybe it wasn't a mistake, but I started getting people to introduce themselves out there. We're running short on time. We're not going to do that today, even though we're very interested in knowing who all is here. Maybe we can do that in the hallways afterwards. So we have with us 6 different presenters here. They all have various roles and responsibilities in working with food safety issues in the state, and so we decided to bring all of them here to come and talk to you about those. So you got to kind of pay attention, take some good notes, and we hope at the end of this session that you'll have a more complete understanding of what all is involved in food safety requirements for selling to institutions, and all that's kind of behind the scenes going on there to help to establish those rules and regulations, which are very important for the audiences that target markets, if you're producers that you're trying to sell to, because these institutional settings, they are oftentimes vulnerable audiences. You are selling to the public in this situation, and you have a lot of responsibility in that. And these agencies and organizations are all here to help you do things the right way so that we all can have much better, nutritious food to eat and to consume it safely. So before I go any further, I'm going to introduce a couple speakers at a time, because I know that we kind of got this broken down by SCDA and Clemson, and we'll kind of carry on from there. So we're going to start with the State Department of Agriculture, and with this we have Kelly Johnson, and Kelly is the Produce Safety Manager at SCDA. She manages the implementation of the Produce Safety Rule in South Carolina. She previously worked as a senior quality supervisor at the Kraft Heinz Company and graduated from Clemson with a BS degree in animal and veterinary science. And with her is Morgan Whalen. Morgan, I haven't met you before, so that's why I look. And Morgan's been with the SCDA since February. Maybe that's why we haven't met. As the outreach coordinator for the Produce Safety Rule. He has multiple years of on-farm experience, and his educational background is in teaching. So we're going to have both of you speak first, and I guess I'm going to be the one in charge of changing slides in here for you, because we do not have a remote today. So just look my way when you're ready for that, okay?
Okay. My name is Kelly Johnson. I'm the Produce Safety Manager at the South Carolina Department of Ag. Raise your hand if you've heard of the Produce Safety Rule before. Okay, so most of the people have. Okay, that's good. I just wanted to go over real quick how our department is implementing the Produce Safety Rule, and go over the exemptions. There's basic exemptions and qualified exemptions. So, okay, here on the first slide. The Produce Safety Department, we are managing the implementation of the Produce Safety Rule in South Carolina. So we have been awarded a grant from FDA to do that implementation. And over 70% of the funds are going to go to outreach. So that speaks volumes in the aspect that we're really wanting to get out there with the farming community, make sure they understand this, make sure they're educated on the Produce Safety Rule before they get inspected. So our Produce Safety Department is made up of the outreach portion and the regulatory portion. So the outreach side of implementation, the goal is to really make the transition to the Produce Safety Rule as smooth as possible for our growers, and to really make sure they understand it before the regulatory people come on the farms. So the regulatory side of the department will just perform inspections and help with exemptions. In May, we passed the Produce Safety Act, so it was signed into law May 19th of this year. So that gives South Carolina Department of Ag the regulatory authority to go on the farms so that the feds aren't coming to South Carolina to be on the farm. So we really wanted to implement both aspects of this, the outreach and the regulatory. South Carolina Department of Ag already has relationships with the farmers. We wanted this to be as easy as possible for them, so that's why we decided to take on both aspects of it. So we are also working with Clemson and Carolina Farm Stewardship Association. They will be helping us with the outreach part, making sure we get all the grower trainings held and people trained, and doing on-farm readiness reviews. So we're really excited to work with them and reaching the farming community. Also, we are going to educate before and while we regulate. And that's just, like I said before, to make sure that the farmers really get a good understanding of this before those inspectors come to the farms. And FDA recently announced they're going to allow more time before inspections start so that we can do on-farm readiness reviews and really get out there and make sure that the growers are prepared for this so that there's no surprises when inspections come around. Like I said, on-farm readiness reviews, that's a chance for the farmers to receive help prior to inspections. So we have our outreach personnel that will come to your farms, we'll go through everything and make sure you're ready for inspections before they come. It's kind of like a mock audit, but it's not going to be like writing down notes or anything. It's just out there to help you. And then also we're going to have an exemption application process. So I'm going to go over the exemptions in a second, but if a farm believes they're exempt, they'll have to apply with the South Carolina Department of Ag for that exemption. So you can go to the So we have basic exemptions. So there's a list. It's called Rarely Consumed Raw list, and you can see it up there. It's a long list, and this list of produce is if you grow only produce on this list, you're exempt from the produce safety rule. This produce, like it says, is rarely consumed raw. So it has that cook step to help kill pathogens, and we don't worry as much about it as produce that you consume raw. The next exemption is if you make less than $25,000. So that is the average of the previous 3-year period. Your average produce sales was less than $25,000. And the third one is produce grown only for personal on-farm consumption. And then the fourth one is all produce grown receives commercial processing that adequately reduces the presence of the microorganisms. So that's like if you grow tomatoes and it gets sent to a facility that will make it in like tomato paste or something. So there's some other requirements that go along with that, like paperwork to make sure that accompanies the produce to the facility. But if you have any questions about that, we can go over it later. And then on the next slide, we have qualified exemption. And qualified exemption is another way. There's several more aspects that a farmer would have to meet. But a farm is eligible for the qualified exemption if during the previous 3-year period, the average food sales was less than $500,000. And I want y'all to pay attention to that because it's food sales for the qualified exemption, but for the basic exemption, it is produce sales. So with food sales, I'm going to go over the definition of food real quick. So the term food means articles used for food or drink for man or animals, chewing gum, and articles used for components of any such article. So that includes things like fruits and vegetables, fish, dairy products, eggs. It even includes like feed for animals, live animals. So all of that would have to be factored into that food sales. Also for the qualified exemption, you have to meet that, and also more than 50% of food sales go to a qualified end user. And a qualified end user is the consumer of the food or a restaurant or retail food establishment that is located, has to be in the same state or no more than 275 miles from that farm. So if you're a grower and you believe that you meet either the basic exemptions or the qualified exemptions, you would have to apply for an exemption with the South Carolina Department of Ag. And we'll have more information on that. Morgan's going to speak a little bit about that as well.
As they said, my name is Morgan Whalen. I'm the outreach coordinator for the produce safety rule. So I will be working very closely with Clemson Extension and the food safety people in Clemson as well to help provide education and outreach for produce farmers that may be affected by the produce safety rule. So first thing I'm going to say is just reach out to us if you have any questions about this. We're here to help. You know, if I don't know the answer, I'm going to point you the right way to find the answer for you. So if you have any questions, visit our website. On our website, you can see the exemption application is on there. I know some of the exemptions are kind of confusing. Raise your hand if you feel kind of confused about the exemptions Kelly just went over. No? Somewhat. It can be confusing for some people. So there's an application online that kind of helps you walk through your farm and how much money you make, what you grow. It helps you get through the exemption process, or it proves to you that you're not exempt. We also have a link called the Assistance with Produce Safety Rule. That provides information like your name, contact information, to where we can come and meet with you on your farm or talk to you on the phone about the rule itself and how the rule might affect your farm. And it also has our contact information. It has Kelly's, myself, and our outreach specialist, Trent Rushton, as well. So you can reach out to any three of us, and we're gonna point you the right way. So some of the upcoming events that the outreach side of the rule is going to be attending here soon is in October, we're hopefully going to go to the on-farm readiness review. I know myself, Trent, and a few Clemson people probably as well will be attending that. And that is a program that the FDA is having to help implement the rule, educate before you regulate. So we'll be coming on the farm, kind of a mock inspection somewhat, and help you prepare for the produce safety rule when the regulation does start. We have regulatory training coming up in October as well, when we hire staff for the regulatory side that we're doing that as well. And the outreach side may be attending that as well. FDA is unsure about that right now, but we may be attending that as well to kind of learn what the regulatory side is going to be looking for, how it kind of works, and so we have a better understanding when we come help you on your farm. We're going to be attending the Southeastern Fruit and Vegetable Conference in January, the South Carolina Agribiz and Farm Expo, and I believe there's going to be a soil summit in Georgia as well that we might be attending. So if you see us at any of those events and want to talk and ask questions, please just stop us. I'm pretty easy to talk to. Trent's very easy to talk to, so is Kelly. So if you have any questions when you see us, just walk around. Just go ahead and stop us. You can go to the next slide. That's it right there. Okay, so the Produce Safety Alliance Grower Training. You may have seen a few tidbits on our website or Clemson's website about this. It's required under the Produce Safety Rule. Clemson Extension and South Carolina Department of Ag are going to be working it together. Obviously, we're going to be using the educational side of Clemson, who has a little more knowledge in food safety than me, who's kind of starting in February. But they're going to kind of help guide us with the training itself. We do have some future dates lined up. I'm not going to say them right now because we're not 100% positive, but go ahead and, if you're interested in going to a training, just keep your eyes peeled on Clemson's website or our website. I also have a sign-up sheet if you would like your email to be into our registrar, to where we send out information, anything regarding the produce safety rule. If you'd like to sign up for that, you can come find me afterwards. And those emails will be going out shortly about those future dates, so if you want to be on that list, please let me know. The last few bullet points are the modules within the training. So it's going to be consisting of the introduction to the produce safety rule, worker health, hygiene, and training, soil amendments, wildlife, domestic animals, and land use, and then ag water. There's 2 parts for ag water, which FDA is kind of revising in itself right now. So those could change. and then post-harvest handling and sanitation, and then how to develop a food safety plan. So that's kind of the modules you'll be going through within the PSA training. Also, we do have some handouts available, folders. We have just basic information on the rule and what it's involved, and some handouts we have. So if you'd like a handout, we have them here, and you can get them after we finish. Thank you.
Questions? Thank you, both of you. And now I get to change to the next slide. Okay, next we have Dr. Julie Northcutt and Dr. Doug Smith from Clemson University. Dr. Northcutt is a professor of food nutrition and packaging sciences and an extension team leader for the Food Safety and Nutrition Extension Program. She's worked with food manufacturers on food safety issues for nearly 30 years. Dr. Smith has been involved with food processing and food safety since 1991 through private industry, university extension departments, and the USDA. He came to Clemson earlier this year and will be coordinating extension efforts with the Food Safety Modernization Act. So I'll let the two of you carry on. Tell us what you're up to.
Okay. Well, as you just heard, my name is Doug Smith. You can go ahead and turn to the next slide. I'm fairly new to Clemson and here to help Julie coordinate some of the food safety, especially FSMA. And we talked about produce safety today because that's going to be the main one that affects most of the South Carolina growers and producers. But there's actually 7 parts to FSMA, and they're all complicated. And so if you got 5 days, I'll be happy to tell you all about it. Since, for the sake of brevity, we're just going to cover the first 3 of these in very minor detail. And as Morgan and Kelly has a folder here, if you have more questions, there is FDA at a glance sites, and those are in your package as well. Is that right?
Safety one.
For the produce safety. And again, we're talking about produce safety for the most part. The first 4 are active right now. The bottom 3 of these really aren't out yet from FDA, but those produce safety, preventive controls for human and animal foods, and foreign supply are active at the moment. And next slide. So we're really talking about more produce safety right now because it's the first one out. It's going to have the most effect, most likely. I will cover just 1 or 2 slides on preventive controls for human and animal foods, because even though you may be exempt or excluded from, or modified exclusion from produce safety, the animal PC rule or the human PC rule might come back and affect you later as those get going with FDA. And go ahead next. So I'm just going to just briefly mention preventive controls for human food rule. Again, that's a 2.5-day class. I'm going to boil this down to 1 slide basically. So the goal there is to use HACCP principles, basically things we've been talking about for meat and poultry for the past 15 years, and then update that with GMPs, good manufacturing practices, and with humans, we're also going to talk about allergens, and incorporate supply chain controls. Where are your ingredients coming from? Where's your packaging material coming from? And then when you finish the product, where's it going to and how's it being handled? So that's about as short a way as I can say that in one sitting. The final rule is starting in September 2015, so it's already started. I would say that I'm not sure how hard that's being prosecuted. I should say the word prosecute, but it's how hard that's being enforced or pushed by FDA at this point, because they have seemed to have backed off, and we actually have documentation from them on the animal rule that they have kind of postponed things slightly right now. So let's see. So okay, next slide. And so you do see some different dates there for the human food preventive control rule. Very small businesses, so you can actually be a very small business and be exempt from some things on the produce safety rule. They get caught with this rule. But September 7, 2017, which is now, is starting for some people, and then it goes. Some people were covered in 2016 for the pasteurized milk ordinance. Those will be coming next year. Next slide. And then preventive controls for animal foods. Once again, this is using HACCP principles to handle animal food. That could be bird seed, pet food, poultry feed mills. These are all covered under this rule. And again, it's about using HACCP principles, supply chain controls before and after your product, as well as good manufacturing practices to cover all those components. And this is also in effect at this point. But again, we've actually had documentation from FDA that they are not enforcing this rule at this time, but they will be looking at GMPs right now, but not looking at the other portions of this possibly until next fall. So, and that completes my portion. And Julie.
Good afternoon. As Dave mentioned, I'm Julie Northcutt, and I'd like to thank Dave and Amy Weaver for giving us a chance to be on the program today. One of the advantages of being this far down the food chain, so to speak, is that many of the slides have already been covered. And so I will go through these pretty quickly, but as you've already seen, FSMA is quite complicated. There are 7 key elements to it. It is supposedly the most sweeping reform that we've had in our food safety system in the last 70 years. Prior to this, we have been solely operating under the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act of 1938 with over 100 different amendments to that. And I have to say, one of the beauties of that previous regulation is that it included many definitions, like the definition that Kelly shared with you about food. That was defined very clearly in that regulation, which prior to that, those definitions, it had been really difficult to enforce or to know what was categorized as what. So it is a learning curve. So with the produce safety rule, here are the areas that are covered. The 7th module is writing a food safety plan. We will be offering these trainings. You'll get a nice little notebook like this. It is certified through the Association of Food and Drug Officials, that is a recognized FDA included organization that is in conjunction with funding from FDA to form the Produce Safety Alliance. So there's a lot of good information out that is on the Produce Safety Alliance webpage that's operated out of Cornell. And as I mentioned, these are the topics that are covered. One of the things to realize is that many of you or many of our farmers are already doing these things. There are just a couple of little nuances that need to be added. One of the areas that possibly people are not doing already is the testing of the agricultural water. So that's one of the new things. And you have to establish a baseline on what those microbiological quality issues are prior to applying it to produce. So that is quite a complicated section. But if you will, go to the next slide, Dave. Here are implementation dates. The first column that you're looking at talks about subpart M. Subpart M is solely related to sprouts. It gets its own little section. And then the other 2 categories, moving to your right, is the compliance dates for agricultural water. And then on the other side of that is the compliance dates for the other portions of the regulation. I'll give you a web link at the end of this so you can get these compliance dates pretty easily, and a new compliance guide that's just been published. If you go to the next line. Kelly covered the exemptions quite well. I've organized it a little bit differently. There are some exemptions, as she mentioned. Some growers are going to be excluded because the commodities that they grow are rarely consumed raw. Some growers are going to be exempted because they have an on-farm or personal consumption. And some are going to be exempt because their average sales is less than 25,000 as an average of the previous 3 years. That is also going to be adjusted for inflation as we progress through this rule. Some growers are going to be exempt, or farmers are going to be exempt because they're sending their produce off to be further processed that will involve a kill step or some additional processing that will adequately reduce the microorganisms. And also there is an exemption, as she covered, for selling to what they deem to be a qualified end user, based on the amount of sales that go to that end user, that qualified end user. I know that's complicated. If you go to the next slide. Let me see if I can. And Kelly already talked about these, so I won't go through these ad nauseum because I know you got other stuff to do. So she covered the 25,000 or less and the definition of produce. So if you go to the next slide. This is a slide that I got from the Produce Safety Alliance. They publish it on their website. It's available for anyone to use. It includes a list of some of the items that are rarely consumed raw. You can argue with some of these, most definitely. There is actually a publication that's out on FDA's website as to why they decided on some of these. You know, we're just the messenger. We did not set this up. So you can read through those. And as Kelly mentioned, if you're consuming it on your farm, you're exempt. Or if you're giving it to another farm under the same management that is consuming it on farm. And then again with the commercial processing. So if you go to the next slide. This exemption, this one is a little bit complicated. So anytime you deal with the federal government, sometimes they will slip in these and words. And you need to realize that it's both parts. So as you're reading through this, it is part 1 and it is part 2. So you don't get to pick part 1 and say, oh, I'm done. So if you read through this, a qualified end user is the consumer of the food, a restaurant or retail. It has to be in the same state, or this is when my bifocal is really failing me miserably, or the same Indian reservation as the farm that produces the food, or not more than 275 miles from such farm. So it's saying you have to have a qualified end user, which is one of those categories, and the average annual sales of all food the farm sells during the previous 3-year period preceding the applicable calendar date was less than 500,000. So both of those, qualified end user, less than this amount. If you go to the next slide. So here's some important things when you approach Morgan Kelly and her team about getting some exemptions. You have to have the appropriate data. So you're going to have to keep financial records to show that you meet any of those caveats that would deem you to be an exempt farm. So financial records, written records that reflect the result of an annual review. You would have to do a review annually to make sure that you're meeting those, the eligibility to be exempt. And there's some other information that the records have to have, the name and address of the farm. Another important issue, particularly when we've worked with some of our small folks that are selling, say, a farmer's market that are exempt, is labeling. Because even if you are exempt, you still have to provide information for someone to trace it back in the event that there was some type of illness associated with the product. So you have to distribute your name, address with the item. And you can also have that information displayed, but the consumer needs to have access to the information of the physical name and address of where they're getting any food product. So, if you go to the next slide, FDA has just come out with a small producer compliance guide, and here's the web link. It's a really good piece of information. You can get many of the dates, you can read through some of the additional exemptions, and maybe I can work with Dave and Amy to make sure everybody gets that web link. Or you could do like the smart guy that my students do, and they just take pictures of the slide. So,
I'll give you 3 seconds to do that.
yep. So if you go to whenever you're ready, yeah, go to the next slide. Okay, so we're working with the South Carolina Department of Ag to offer some trainings. Morgan wouldn't announce the dates. I think maybe he was a little scared too, but I will announce the dates. The first one is in conjunction with some of our other folks at Clemson University. They're doing a workshop in Charleston at the Coastal Rec Center on Highway 17. And so we'll be offering this certification that meets all the regulatory requirements on November the 7th. If you're interested in that, you can email me and I'll give you that email address in a minute. We're also doing another one at the South Carolina Department of Ag Phillips Market Center on January the 16th and 17th. There's 2 dates listed for that because my preference and what our folks will be doing is this is 7 modules. It is a long, long day. It takes from 8:30 to 5. And we didn't want to just cram this down your throat and throw you out the door. So we are offering an optional second day if anybody needs any additional help and wants to work on writing a food safety plan on an optional day. We will do that as well, but it would not be required. So that's the reason for those 2 dates. And I'm not certain if we're going to be able to, in November, I'm still working on getting that second optional day, but we would like to provide that. If you go to the next slide, here's some of our folks. This is part of our food safety team. We've got 42 folks on my team, which is the food safety and nutrition team that work all around the state. These folks help support everything related to FSMA, and nearly all of them are produce safety instructors. They're all HACCP certified and lead instructors. And anyway, you're welcome to contact any one of us at any time, including me, for any information you need.
That's it. You want me to introduce you, or do you want to introduce yourself?
I'm good either way.
You get the microphone. So
All right, I got the microphones.
Yeah, and neither one of you have a PowerPoint, right?
I do.
You do.
I do.
I did not receive it.
Okay.
Would you like it?
That's okay. I can just wing it. I had a PowerPoint, but it's okay.
Okay.
It was a great PowerPoint too.
We'll make sure you all have access to it.
Now that you have had your minds blown by some really, really smart people talking about FSMA, let the good old boy from Alabama dumb it down for you. And I'm not going to talk about FSMA. My name is Matt Burles, and I'm with the South Carolina Department of Agriculture. I am a USDA certified lead auditor as well as an audit reviewer. So I'm actually the guy that comes out to your farm and does your audit. I recognize a lot of faces from actually being on your farm or in your operation doing your audit. I was, I guess, asked to speak on this panel to kind of get away from the FSMA stuff a little bit and get back towards the GAP stuff, which is also just as important. I said dumb some stuff down for you, and I said that very much tongue-in-cheek because it's not to minimize the importance of what I'm talking about. It's just, what I'm going to talk about is common sense stuff. And I've heard a saying recently that that's apparently not quite so common anymore. But the stuff that I'm going to talk about is basically things that you're probably already doing. And that's general good agricultural practices, good handling practices. We have a couple of different kinds of audits that you could do depending on the type of operation you have, the type of commodities you're growing, and the size of your operation and what you need. A lot of folks require specific types of audits, and so you need to find out, whoever is buying your produce, what they are going to require. And then that's how you will base on your audit. Their requirements are how you're going to base your audit needs. So those common entry-level food safety audit, and I guess Trish and I, you might as well tag team this thing since there's no PowerPoint here. But the most common entry-level food safety is just a standard good agricultural practices, good handling practices audit offered by the USDA. And that is it's a basic level food safety audit. It consists of 6 parts, and yet you're going to see parts 1 through 7. You're going to notice that part 5 is no longer there because part 5 was done away with and then integrated into every other part of the audit. So rather than rebranding all their stuff, they just decided to not have part 5. That part was traceability, by the way. And for whenever you start looking at that, there are several resources, and I had a link that if you've got your pen and paper handy, the website is ams.usda.gov. And that website is, there's an auditing and accreditation tab, and you can go on there, and that will list every audit that the USDA offers. The GAP-GIP, the harmonized, the leafy greens, which is not really going to pertain to us so much, but it does the folks out in California and Arizona. The organic, you can find the organic stuff on there. Again, that's not really so much me, but you can find that stuff on there also. There's a tomato audit protocol for the tomato growers. We do have a few folks in the state that do use that tomato audit protocol audit, which is really similar to the harmonized. And the mushrooms, we do have an MGAP audit, which no one in the state utilizes because it is specified towards button-type mushrooms. So we do have some mushroom growers, but if you don't grow button-type mushrooms, you don't do the MGAP, you just do the regular GAP. We learned that the hard way because we went out and conducted an MGAP audit on a place that did not need an MGAP audit. So if you're not growing button-type mushrooms, then you're just going to do the regular GAP. And we will not have to learn that lesson the hard way again. I guess it is kind of good that I don't have that because I was going to have to give Dave the signs like he was going to steal second base or something to turn my slides. But basically the GAP and all audits deal with a few different sections, and it goes all the way from pre-planning to the end product, when it ends up on the plate. And I believe that should affect most all of us here if we consume fruits or vegetables, which probably pertains to most all of us here. Common practices from things as simple as providing training, adequate training based on your food safety policies and procedures to your employees, to visitors that come onto your farm or operational site, to the most important thing, and Trish should probably give it like a 3-day dissertation on this, document, keep records, because I believe you. I believe that what you tell me is going on, and I believe that what you tell me is happening and right, and I believe everything you're saying. But if in the eyes of an auditor, if it's not there for your documentation, how do I know for sure that it's taking place? So that's why I say that a lot of things that you're already doing, or a lot of things you're already doing, just make sure that you keep that proper documentation. Trish, do you want to go before and I'm going to be here to take a bunch of questions too, I'll just go ahead and let Trish talk for a while too, because we're probably going to have a lot of the same things to talk about. That's all right with Dave. Can I do that?
You guys, since we don't have your PowerPoint, you get to set the rules.
I love it.
All right. Matt and I are always the one that break the rules.
That's it.
So I'm Patricia Trupp. I am the local produce safety manager for Carolina Farm Stewardship Association. And for those who are not familiar with the Carolina Farm Stewardship Association, very commonly referred to as CFSA, we are a nonprofit that started in North Carolina over 30 years ago. We have expanded to South Carolina on many of our programs, and we're there to support small and mid-scale farms with food system solutions, organic certification, good agricultural practices or GAP certification. We do conservation planning, assist with that, and then some policy work and also some ag business development. So it's a great resource for small to mid-scale farms. Kelly had mentioned previously our work in South Carolina in partnership with SCDA. We will be assisting with the education component as well as outreach and assisting with conducting on-farm readiness reviews. We all are very supportive of education first. And we did recently hear from FDA, I believe it was last week, that produce inspections on the farm as far as FSMA is concerned will not begin until probably 2019. So that gives all of us extra time to educate ourselves as well as the growers within the state. As far as good agricultural practices, and Matt, we run into each other in the field a lot. My hat is assisting the grower on a consulting level. We actually go on the farm. The growers know they need to get GAP certification. And we basically hold your hand through the entire process, from conducting risk assessments on the farm, writing a food safety plan, confirming with the buyers as to which GAP audit you need. Matt mentioned several, and there's many more out there. We can't even list them all at this point. But different buyers are requiring different certifications. So we make sure we're on the same path before we even get started. Then we continue with assisting with the food safety plan, reviewing it, making sure that it does cover the risk and risk mitigation strategies that you need on your farm specific to your operation. And then, of course, we're there to support you during your audit. So it's a great service to the growers, and we've had about 25 different farms apply for the services. We had funds for this year to assist 20 growers through the state. So we did help 20 growers in the state with GAP certification, and about 80% of those did achieve GAP certification this year. So very good. One thing I did want to expand on, a lot of people say, well, what is good agricultural practices in comparison to FSMA? And I'm sure Matt gets this question all the time as well. I want to make it very clear that good agricultural practices, or GAP, is a voluntary program. It's a market-driven program, very buyer-driven. The buyers are the ones requiring this, where FSMA, or the Food Safety Modernization Act, is actually the law. So we have to abide by the law. So making those, distinctions are, it's very helpful to separate the two. Right now, especially with the small to mid-scale growers, there is time for implementation of FSMA with the exception of some record-keeping components for those qualified exempt that both Kelly and both of them mentioned earlier. Julie. So, we're all out here to help educate you. And so just as Julie said, if anybody has any questions pertaining to GAP or FSMA, we're here to answer your questions as well. Thank you.
She did hit on a good point. Whenever I go out to do your audit, I do stress that it is a voluntary purpose. I'm not a regulatory authority with the USDA, like the FDA would be, as it is very much regulatory. So I'm there because you asked me to be there. One of the things that I did have on there was the steps in order for you to get your audit actually requested and then kind of get the ball rolling. There's a form that you can find on the ams.usda.gov link that I gave you earlier called the FV237A. And that is the audit request form that will need to be filled out, and then Tricia, she actually will help you with that. If you are utilizing CFSA services in there and her consulting, she will help you get the necessary forms to meet in order for us to do that. So,
One other thing I wanted to mention is that the fees for the audit is increasing beginning October 1st. I want to make sure you all are all aware of that. This is a USDA increase. So the fee currently is $92 an hour, but wanted to mention, that there are cost shares available through SCBA to assist you on paying for your gap audit as well.
Got all that?
thank you. So,
How about we get a hand for the PowerPoint list? So when Matt was doing that, it was reminding me of how many times have you put together a shopping list and went out to the grocery store and you know that you left it back at home? So the practice of putting that presentation together, you recall most of it anyway. Great job. I have a couple questions here from the floor, and again, if you have some questions, go ahead and write them down. Maybe at this point you won't have to, just let me know what they are. But I'm going to read these first two off one at a time, and those of you who want to field these with some good information, please raise your hand and start to field them. Okay, with FSMA PSR coming into play, do you think some institutions, and this is a farm institution conference, so those kind of markets, may stop requiring GAP certification? Any opinion on that? Any insights?
So we have spoken to several buyers throughout the Carolinas, and in their opinion, at the current moment, which this can change, they said they don't feel like GAP is going anywhere, that they will continue to require GAP. One of the reasons is because with FSMA, the inspections are one every 5 years, and GAP is an annual inspection. So the buyers really want to be confident that someone is inspecting the farm on an annual basis. With that said, we do know that there are third-party certification bodies and also the audit owners, the scheme owners, that are in the process of making all GAP audits FSMA compliant. So we're anticipating over the next 2 years or so that if you are on the road to GAP certification and you continue on that road, that you will just have to modify your program to the new GAP requirements, and you will also be FSMA compliant.
Anyone else have any insights into that question?
Specifically speaking, the USDA harmonized audit just underwent some modifications, and those were directed towards the water requirements, which you're seeing with the produce safety rule. So without using the term FSMA compliant, theoretically speaking, if you undergo the USDA harmonized audit, then you should be able to pass a FSMA inspection without using the term FSMA compliant.
And additional changes are in the making for harmonized GAP as well.
If I had a crystal ball, which I don't, I would anticipate that as we go down this path, that eventually the produce safety rule is going to be modified increasingly such that it is more mimics GAP in the future, because right now, GAP certification is just a little bit more strict, and so it's not going to go away. But what could potentially happen is as we get more and more familiar with how to meet the produce safety rule, our farmers and growers get more experience with keeping those types of records. They're gonna get better at doing that, and I think that's probably FDA will say, okay, we need to increase our restrictions or change our regulation to match it. That's just me with my experience with FDA. And again, don't shoot the messenger.
You can shoot my comment.
Anyone else have a comment to make? This next question, I'm going to kind of take liberties with it a little bit, because It was about getting clarification of roles between Clemson, SCDA, CFSA, everyone, the folks that are involved in this process. Right now, we're all sitting at the same table, which that's really valuable to everyone talking to each other, but you all do have distinct roles in all of this. Can I just pass this microphone down the table and just see if we can kind of get to the clarity in that? Julie's eager to start the process.
Clemson has always been in the education business, so that's what we do. We're in the education business. So we don't enforce, but we help take the law and interpret it and teach you how to meet it. So we'll continue in that role. I don't want to speak for my colleagues, but the regulatory portion is going to come from South Carolina Department of Ag. They're going to be the ones to make sure that you have all of the regulation met that complies with FDA. And our colleagues on Trish's side are likely going to be helping us with the on-farm portion, and we'll collaborate all together with making sure that everybody knows how to meet those different pieces of the pie. We'll do the teaching. So.
Julie, can I ask just a clarifying question on that? So extension agents, some extension agents will have the training, but not all. Is that correct?
Okay, realize that.
Well, just because, so when,
Yeah.
like I'm talking to a grower and I'm
Right.
like, call your extension agent.
Yeah,
quote unquote.
okay, so realize that we have, depending on how you count it, we have 6 different extension teams.
Right.
And some have a little bit more experience with horticulture.
Yep.
Some, like on my team, have a little bit more experience with nutrition and with microbiology. So across the board with Clemson folks, we will be partnering among ourselves to make sure that we can answer every question that you have. So it may be that you have a question that we need to direct to one of our horticulture agents. You may then come back and say, I have a microbiology question, which my team might be a little bit more readily able to answer. So right now we have about, I want to say 12 of our agents that are certified instructors for the produce safety rule. We only have 2 people that are lead instructors. And the difference with the way that they have written it is you have to have a lead instructor in the room every time the class is taught, but that lead instructor doesn't have to be teaching every section. So we've got probably about 5 other applications in to become lead instructor, but the Produce Safety Alliance is about a year out on approving anything. So,
Okay.
does that help?
Is there an easy way for us to know which, it's just that whole like phone tree thing, like
Yeah.
call her, call him, call this
Yeah.
guy, no, just kidding, call her.
Yeah.
So is there a way to say to the farmers, find a lead instructor, this is your best bet?
Well, the place to start is with our county extension
Okay.
office in your county.
Perfect.
And call them, and they will be able to help you get to the right folks.
Good.
So, and, just to let you know that, not that I want to talk about budgets, but our budget was approved this past session, so we will have individuals in every county office that we're working on hiring an administrative assistant. We've had some county offices where we didn't have somebody in there all the time because we didn't have an administrative assistant. So our budget got approved. Over the next 6 months, you'll see us adding admins to every county office.
Great.
So that should help with communication. So.
Thank you.
Let's circle back to that role differentiation question. I think you answered it from Clemson's perspective. I want to make sure we cover everyone else.
You got a couple of folks up here from SCDA. I'm up here as an employee of the South Carolina Department of Agriculture through a cooperative agreement with the United States Department of Agriculture. And specifically, I supervise our fresh fruit and vegetable inspections. I supervise our food safety audits. And by that, I mean fresh, on the farm stuff, not the FSMA stuff. I do our GAP programs, as well as our grain division in Charleston. So I'm up here, first and foremost, to let you know, I'm not a consultant. I'm not going to consult. That's not what I do. I actually come and perform the audits. So we have folks, Brooke Horton is here. She is a consultant and she does a good job at that. So if you have questions regarding that, I'm actually here in the capacity of an actual auditor. So.
And just as Clemson stated, CFSA is not a regulatory body either. We're there to help educate. In North Carolina, when Carolina Farm Stewardship Association launched the Local Produce Safety Initiative, we realized that North Carolina State Extension came to us and said, we would like to partner with you on this. They don't have they just don't have the capacity to be on the ground on the farms as CFSA does. So that's kind of how it all came together there, and then we expanded to South Carolina, and after partnering with NCDA, NC State, and CFSA, we're a trio, literally, when it comes to implementing and educating on food safety, and that's what we had envisioned here in South Carolina, and now we're partnering with SCDA, and distinguishing between the workshops, I guess we're delivering. I'm delivering GAP workshops throughout the state, where Clemson is delivering the PSA trainings throughout the state currently.
Got like 1 minute perhaps to wrap it up.
I've got a question. So ultimately, SCDA is in charge of the implementation of the produce safety rule. We are working closely with Clemson and CFSA. We have sub-awarded them part of our grant money to help us with that. So we have established memorandums of understanding with them. So SCDA is in charge of the outreach and the regulatory part, but we have listed Clemson and CFSA to help us with that because it's going to be a big undertaking and we can't do it by ourselves. So, we're excited to work with them and we're excited to see where this goes. And we are, and to do the exemption application has to go through SCDA. So at one time or another, if you want to be exempt, you have to contact SCDA.
Okay.
Any
We're
more
gonna
questions?
wrap it up there, folks, because Amy has an announcement to make. But thank you very much, panel, for sharing with us everything. We know it's a complex, evolving subject matter area, right? So thank you very much.